The pharmacist slid the orange prescription bag across the counter and then didn't let go. Her fingers stayed on it. I looked up. She was watching the window behind me. Not the door, the window, the narrow one that faced the waiting area on the other side of the half wall where the blood pressure machine sat and the rack of reading glasses nobody ever bought. "Don't turn around," she said. Quiet, like she was telling me the generic was available. "What?" "The man in the gray jacket. He followed you in." She finally pushed the bag toward me. "He's been on his phone since you walked up. He's reading it, but his camera is on." I stood very still. My hand was on the counter. I could feel my own pulse in my fingertips. "He was in the parking lot too," she said. "I saw him when I came back from my break. He parked 2 spaces from your car and waited until you went inside." I want to back up, because none of this will make sense unless you understand where I was in my life at that moment. My name is Lorena. I'm 63 years old. I lived in a house in Flagstaff, Arizona that my late husband Norman and I bought in 1987 for $92,000. We painted every room ourselves. We planted the juniper bushes along the front fence. We put in the flagstone path to the back door because Norman said concrete was too harsh against the mountain light. Norman passed away 4 years ago. Lung cancer. 8 months from diagnosis to the end. After he died, I kept everything exactly the way it was for almost a year. His reading chair, the hook where he hung his cap. I even kept the little magnetic notepad on the refrigerator because the last thing he'd written on it was a grocery list. Milk, sourdough, the good mustard, and I couldn't bring myself to throw it away. Eventually, I started to come back to myself. You do, if you let yourself. It's slow, and it's not the same as it was, but you come back. My daughter and her husband were living in Sacramento. She called every Sunday, sometimes Wednesday too. They had a son, my grandson, who was 7 and obsessed with dinosaurs, and talking to him was the best 20 minutes of any given week. What I did not have, once Norman was gone, was anyone nearby. Flagstaff is small. Our friends from the early years had moved or passed on or drifted into their own lives. I had neighbors, but not the kind you call at 10 at night. So when my son-in-law started coming around, driving up from Phoenix where he had business, stopping in for dinner, offering to help with the things that needed doing, I was grateful. More than grateful. I was relieved. His name is Garrett. He's good-looking in the way that makes you trust him before you've thought about whether you should. Firm handshake, looks you in the eye, remembers details. He remembered that I take my coffee black, that I have a bad knee, that Norman had been an electrician. The first time he fixed the loose hinge on my kitchen cabinet without being asked, I thought, my daughter chose well. He started talking about the market maybe 6 months after Norman's passing, real estate values going up, property taxes about to get reassessed in Coconino County. People my age were cashing out and moving somewhere more manageable. Had I thought about it? I told him I hadn't. He said that was fine, just something to consider. He said it the way you say it when you mean it's already decided, gently, not urgently, the way water moves around a rock. He came back to it in the spring, said he'd been talking to some investors he knew, said the Flagstaff market was peaking, and if I was ever thinking about liquidating, now was the time. He had people who could handle everything, make it easy. No real estate agents, no showings, no mess. I said I'd think about it. He left a folder on my kitchen table. I didn't open it that night. What I didn't tell my daughter was how tired I'd been, not physically, though my knee was getting worse, but the other kind of tired, the kind that comes from managing a house alone, the water heater, the property taxes, the gutter that needed clearing every fall. Norman had handled all of it so naturally that I hadn't understood until he was gone how much invisible labor held a house together. Garrett seemed to understand this without being told. "You shouldn't have to do all this alone," he said one evening. We were sitting on the porch. The sun was dropping behind the San Francisco peaks, and the sky was doing that thing it does in Arizona, going orange, and then deep pink, and then a purple, so dark it looks invented. "You've earned something easier," he said. "A nice place. No maintenance. Community around you." He talked about an active adult community in Scottsdale. A friend of his had moved there. Swimming pool, organized activities, a shuttle to the medical center. I told him I wasn't sure I was the Scottsdale type. He laughed and said I might surprise myself. I opened the folder that night. It was full of documents I didn't entirely understand. A purchase agreement, something called a deed in lieu, a power of attorney form with my name already typed in the signature line. The purchase price was listed at $240,000. I looked it up the next morning. My neighbor's house, smaller than mine, had sold the previous fall for $385,000. I closed the folder. I didn't call my daughter. I didn't call a lawyer. I told myself I was going to think about it more carefully. That was a Thursday. The signing was scheduled for Monday. That Saturday, I drove to the pharmacy on Milton Road to pick up my blood pressure medication. The pharmacist's name tag said Wanda. She was maybe 40, with close-cropped natural hair and the steady eyes of someone who'd spent 20 years watching people pretend they were fine. "He's still there," she said. She was filling another bag now, moving her hands deliberately, not looking at him. "Do you have someone you can call? Someone who can come here?" I thought about my daughter in Sacramento. I thought about the folder on my kitchen table. I thought about the power of attorney form with my name already typed. "I don't know," I said. "Do you know why he's watching you?" "I think so." I stopped. "I think someone sent him." She set the bag down and looked at me directly for the first time. "Then we're going to figure this out. You're not leaving this counter until we do." I called my daughter from the pharmacy break room. Wanda stood just outside the door, which she'd cracked open so she could watch the waiting area. My daughter answered on the second ring. I told her everything: the folder, the price, the power of attorney, the man in the gray jacket. There was a silence on the other end that told me she already knew something was wrong. Maybe not everything, but enough. She'd had a feeling, she said later. Garrett had been evasive about money for months. There were accounts she couldn't access anymore, transfers she didn't recognize. "Mom," she said, "do not sign anything. Do not go back to the house alone." "I have to go back. My things are there." "Not tonight. Tonight you go somewhere else. Is there anywhere you can go?" There was. A woman from my church Opal who had a spare room and had told me twice that her door was open if I ever needed it. I'd never taken her seriously. I did now. My daughter said she was booking a flight. She'd be in Flagstaff by morning. Wanda walked me to my car. She'd written down everything: the description of the man, the make of the car he'd arrived in, the time and date, in her own handwriting, on pharmacy notepaper, and she made a copy on the store's small copier and handed me one. "Keep that," she said. "Don't lose it." "Why are you doing this?" I asked. I don't know why I asked it. It just came out. She looked at me like the question surprised her. "Because you came in here for your medication," she said. "That's reason enough?" The man in the gray jacket was gone when I got to the parking lot. His car was gone. I sat in my car for a long time before I started the engine. My daughter arrived at Opal's house at 6:45 the next morning. She'd taken the first flight out of Sacramento and driven from Phoenix in the dark. I opened the door and she held on to me for a long time without saying anything. Then she sat down at Opal's kitchen table, pulled out her laptop, and started making calls. The first was to an attorney named Barbara, a woman who specialized in elder financial abuse, whose card my daughter had found 3 months earlier and saved without telling me. She had been watching Garrett, quietly, for longer than I realized. Barbara told us not to touch anything in the house until she could send someone to document the condition. She told us to preserve all communications, texts, emails, voicemails. She told us the power of attorney form was not valid because I had not signed it. He was waiting for Monday, my daughter said. Then we have time, Barbara said. Not much, but enough. The next week was the hardest I'd had since the 8 months of Norman's illness. There were interviews with a detective from the Flagstaff Police Department who specialized in financial crimes. There was a civil attorney, in addition to Barbara, who dealt with the real estate side. There was a conversation with my bank, during which I learned that someone, I later understood it was Garrett, had made 2 inquiries about my account balance in the previous month, using information he would have only been able to obtain from documents inside my home. My daughter sat with me through all of it. She barely slept. She ate whatever Opal put in front of her. She cried twice in private, and both times she came back to the table composed. She was angry in a way I'd never seen from her, not loud, contained, focused. She told me later that what scared her most wasn't the money. It was the power of attorney form. If I had signed it, Garrett would have had the legal authority to make decisions on my behalf. Financial, medical, real estate, everything. He was going to take the house and whatever came after it, she said, and he was going to do it legally. Garrett, when confronted, first by my daughter, then by Barbara, then by law enforcement, denied everything. He said the folder was informational, not binding. He said the man in the pharmacy parking lot was a coincidence. He said the account inquiries were a misunderstanding. He was good at it, he was calm and reasonable, and he kept using the word legitimate. The investors were legitimate. The process was legitimate. The purchase price reflected legitimate market conditions. Barbara had been doing this for 22 years. She had heard every version of legitimate. The investigation took 4 months. I won't walk through every step of it because some of it is still part of an ongoing civil proceeding, and I've been advised to be careful about what I say publicly. What I can tell you is that Garrett was not working alone. There was a network, small but deliberate, targeting widowed homeowners in rural Arizona, Flagstaff, Prescott, Sholo, older women mostly, living alone, property owners. They had a system. They identified targets through public records, probate filings, property transfers, death notices. They inserted themselves through personal relationships. They were patient, they didn't rush. They built trust over months, sometimes over a year before they made their move. I was not the first. I was not the last either, but after the investigation, I was the one who went on record. My house is still mine. I had the flagstone path Norman laid repaired last spring, where 2 of the stones had shifted. I planted a rose bush along the back fence, something I'd been meaning to do for years. I hired a property manager to handle the maintenance things, gutters, the water heater, the small repairs, so that I don't have to manage them alone, but so that I also stay here in the house I know. My daughter calls more often now, not out of worry, though I know some of it is that, but because something shifted between us. We talk differently, longer, about things that matter. She told me a few months ago that she'd looked up Wanda from the pharmacy. She wanted to write her a thank you letter. She found out that Wanda had transferred to a different location across town. I drove there on a Tuesday afternoon. Wanda was behind the counter when I walked in. She didn't recognize me at first. I'd had my hair cut since then, shorter, and I'd put on a little weight, which my doctor was pleased about. "I was at the Milton Road store," I said. "About a year ago, you walked me to my car." She looked at me for a moment. Then she said, "I remember." I'd brought her a tin of pecan cookies I'd made from scratch. It seemed like not enough. It also seemed like exactly right. She took the tin and held it in both hands and said, "How did it turn out?" "I kept my house," I said. She nodded slowly, like this was the answer she had hoped for but hadn't assumed. "Good," she said. "That's how it should have gone." I think about the folder sometimes, how close I came to opening it on a Thursday night and deciding, alone in my kitchen with my bad knee and my tired bones, that easier was better than what I had. I think about the power of attorney form with my name already typed. I think about Norman's grocery list still on the refrigerator. Milk, sourdough, the good mustard. I never threw it away. I don't intend to. The house is mine. The flagstone path is mine. The juniper bushes along the front fence that Norman planted in 1989, that have grown taller than either of us expected, that turn silver in the late afternoon when the light comes down off the peaks, those are mine too. I did not make it easy for them. I know that now. I keep thinking about the folder Garrett left on my kitchen table. How ordinary it looked. A manila folder, the kind you buy in bulk at any office supply store. Nothing about it said, "This is the thing that could take your house." That's what I didn't understand then, that the danger doesn't always look like danger. Sometimes it looks like helpfulness. It looks like someone who remembers how you take your coffee and fixes a hinge without being asked. It looks like patience and warmth and a reasonable voice explaining that you've earned something easier. I was tired and alone, and I mistook that kindness for safety. That's not something I'm ashamed of anymore, but it's something I think about. What I've come to believe, not from a book, not from anyone telling me what to think, but from living through it, is that the outcomes of our lives follow pretty logically from the choices we make and the character of the people around us. Garrett made choices over a long period of time. He built something deliberate and calculated, aimed at a woman he thought wouldn't push back. And Wanda made a choice too, in a single moment, to pay attention when it would have been just as easy to look away. Both of those choices had consequences. That's not fate, that's just how things work. What Wanda had, and what I had to find in myself during that long week, wasn't anything dramatic. It was simply the willingness to do the right thing, even when it was inconvenient. Wanda didn't know me. She had no reason to get involved. She got involved anyway because her sense of what was right was stronger than her preference for an uncomplicated afternoon. I think about that a lot. How moral clarity, when it's real, doesn't require an audience or a reward. She walked me to my car. She made a copy of her notes. She asked how it turned out a year later, like she'd been carrying it quietly the whole time. And my daughter, the way she sat at Opal's kitchen table with her laptop open at 6 in the morning, after a red-eye flight, making calls, building a case, that took something I can only describe as clear-headed courage. Not the loud kind, the kind that stays focused when everything feels like it's falling apart. She had figured things out before I had. She had been watching, thinking, waiting for the moment when she could act. That kind of intelligence, the kind that doesn't panic, that gathers rather than scatters, is something I didn't fully appreciate until I saw it in her that week. As for me, I had to find something I wasn't sure I still had. After Norman died, I think part of me believed that the hard part of my life was behind me, that I was just maintaining now, waiting out the years in a house full of things I loved. But you don't get to stop being a person who makes decisions. You don't get to hand that over to someone else and call it rest. What I had to do, talk to my daughter, walk into that attorney's office, sit across from a detective, and tell the whole story from the beginning. None of it was easy. It required me to keep going when I would have preferred to stop. That stubbornness, that refusal to let someone else write the ending of my own story, I didn't know I still had it. I do now. The juniper bushes Norman planted are still there. The flagstone path is still there. My name is still on the deed. That's not luck. That's what happens when enough people choose at the right moments to do the hard thing.